Hi BookTube, and welcome to a new video. This is the BookTube mid-year Freakout tag. I was tagged by Kelly over at Books I'm Not Reading, and we actually share a book in our response to these prompts, which is probably not surprising because it was a buddy read with her and her husband Jason. So this is basically a sort of a halfway check-in of our reading year at the midpoint of the year. I'm a week early, but I thought, what the hell. And I'm going to start off as I normally do with some stats of my 6 months reading. Stats are the only thing that I actually take from my day job and apply outside. So as of today, I've completed 61 reads, of which 53 were fiction and 8 were non-fiction. 2 of those 61 were rereads for me, and there was one did not finish, which is very unusual for me. I normally do sort of battle on to the bitter end. Of the 61 fiction books, 6 were poetry, and 1 was written as a play script by Evan Dara, but I'm not sure it was meant as a play script in the sense of it. I don't think it's ever meant to be performed. It was his sort of experimental form for a short novel written as a play. Of the 61 fiction, 8 authors are from the UK, 21 are from the US, and 24 from the rest of the world, made up of 4 German, which is not surprising because I'm participating in Read More German Lit this year, 1 Swiss, 1 Austria, see above, 3 Canadian, which are all Anne Carlson, 1 Russian, 1 Korean, 1 China, 1 from Martinique, the Caribbean island, 5 from France, 2 from Mexico, 1 from Palestine and 1 from Croatia. And I've forgotten to write down the male-female split. Just bear with me a minute. So of the 53 fiction books, 33 by men and 20 by women. So that's the stats. And on to the prompts. Okay, so the best book you've read so far in 2020, and I'm going to do 1 fiction, 1 non-fiction. Fiction, Love and Other Thought Experiments by Sophie Ward. Most of these books will have reviews. Rather than sort of repeat what I say on those reviews, I'll post links to them. But this is a wonderful book. I wonder if it'll be knocked off its perch, its #1 perch, by the end of the year. I almost doubt it. It is kind of what it says on the tin. Each chapter does have a sort of a quotation or a theory from the theory of mind, and it feeds into the action of the characters. A very, very, very stimulating and beautiful and touching book. And my non-fiction is Lost in Math by Sabine Hossenfelder, How Beauty Leads Physics Astray. I was recommended this by Roxy over at Rec Me Books and stuff. Please go and subscribe to her because she has wonderful book selections, particularly non-fiction. And this is just great. This gave me the firepower of something I've always felt intuitively about science. And this sort of, crystallised it, has armed me in some arguments and answered a problem that I can never get to the bottom of, which is why with each sort of radical scientific discovery, such as Einstein's theories of relativity, why it doesn't junk all the preceding sort of theories that came before, such as Newtonian mechanics, why we still use Newtonian mechanics as an approximation of reality. And the answer is because Newtonian mechanics applies to the scale we humans operate on and our perspective and our sensory perception works, whereas Einstein was talking about sort of planetary bodies and movement, things observed when the observer is moving at the speed of light, which obviously never happens in our everyday lives. And then the quantum mechanics lot obviously only refers to tiny, tiny subatomic particles, which again is not the daily scale we operate on. So that's why we still use Newton. Plus, of course, the math still basically holds as a good approximation. Okay. 2, best sequel you've read in so far in 2020. None, I don't read sequels. 3, new release you haven't read yet but want to. So this arrived through my letterbox on Saturday. This is The Blind Light by Stuart Evers, quite a chunky. Now, there's plenty of sort of family sagas, and this, from what I understand, is a family saga. But what the Brits don't do is ally that terribly often to the world outside of the family house, i.e., the politics and culture of the times. And I understand that this does, and the blind light, I think, refers to the sort of nuclear testing, because this starts in the you know, the nuclear age, which, you know, you read a lot about in America, but not so much in the UK. So I'm really looking forward to that. But it's quite a chunkster, so I'm not sure when I'll get to it. Probably the autumn. 4. Most anticipated release for the second half of the year. Well, it's a book on Fitzcarraldo editions. It's called Rave by Reinhard Goetz. It comes out 1st of July, so just in the second half of the year. I've got it on pre-order. I read one of his other books, which actually had a sort of punk rock hardcore theme, although that was not the theme of the book, but it was a constant thing throughout. And enjoyed that, so I'm looking forward to this. It's about rave culture in the 90s in Germany, I assume Berlin, but we'll have to wait and see. But something that I was really hoping would come out, that actually should have been out I think last week, but has been put back a year because of COVID, is David Peace's Tokyo Redux, which is the 3rd part in his Japan trilogy, which, if you consider that he wrote parts 1 and 2 were published in 2008 and 2009, I've waited a long 11 years for this. I understand that at some point he wasn't happy with it and ripped it up and started again. That's part of why the delay. And of course it's been delayed again because Peace is someone who does a lot of promotion through speaking and events and stuff, and feels that if he can't do that, he wants the book pushed back, which I totally understand, but again, it's quite disappointing to a fan like me. 5, sorry. Biggest disappointment. That is Huracan Season by Fernando Melchior, which is on the long list of the Man Booker International Prize. Highly touted, highly recommended, and I hated it. I just thought it was one tone, and that tone was shrill. And there was the fact that it had no light and dark in it just meant that all its characters, who were, you know, victims of poverty in Mexico, there was no possible way out. You know, it was like these lives are very, very degraded, and that's their lot. And I, you know, that was deeply unfulfilling to me, even if it's true. Oh, and the reason I don't have it to hand is because it's been banished to the shed, the pariah of my books. Biggest surprise. Well, the fact that it's a surprise is because I'm an idiot. It's Tim O'Brien's In the Lake of the Woods, which is the one that Kelly mentioned. And I'm an idiot because I read The Things They Carried, which I love, and I had it in my head that's all Tim O'Brien ever wrote. And when I found out that he wrote other stuff, I bought a couple of them but hadn't got round to reading them. I just thought, well, you know, he's not going to be able to top The Things They Carried. You know, these are just going to be, you know, bog standard Vietnam reportage novels. Anyway, so this was the second O'Brien book I read as part of the buddy read, and my God, this is a brilliant book. To be fair, it could very easily have been my number one with that. But what's so good about this is I didn't realise how good a craftsman O'Brien is, because it's a multi-voiced book, and the different styles of chapters, different genres almost, and it's just brilliantly put together. I mean, he's an absolute sort of puppet master, not of his characters, but of the devices he uses in novel writing. I'm just in awe of this book. It was fantastic. Favourite new author, debut or new to me? Well, he's both new to me and this is his debut, but his follow-up novel is due out later this year, I think. This is Robert Perisic, Our Man in Iraq. He's a Croatian writer, still lives there. And what a very good, funny, punchy, it's basically drawing a portrait of what modern day Croatia is, which in 15 years have gone from state socialism through a bloody civil war, nationalism, a sort of fascist government, sort of throwback to the regime that was a Nazi puppet state during the Second World War. Basically got sort of reinvigorated once it got independence, and once those people had sort of passed from power and had died, now it is sort of a fledgling democracy. And that's a lot to cope with in 15 years, and it's a country, according to, or as portrayed in this book, that's slightly struggling to find its identity and its way in the world. And this is a book about a correspondent who's sent to cover the war in Iraq. You know, who cares about what the Croatian view of the war in Iraq is, which is the point he makes. You know, Croatia used to make the news through the civil war, and now it's, you know, it's just you know, it's a side player. It's not front and centre anymore. But this is terrific, very acerbic, very funny, very punchy, and I'm really looking forward to his second book. Newest Fictional Crash. I never understand this question. Is it a character in a book, i.e. a fictional character that you have a crush on, which does not compute? Or is it a writer that I have a crush on? Now, because I am a writer myself, I think I can have crushes on other writers' style or what they do with their writing. And that's what I'm going to apply to here. The Iliac Crest by Cristina, Rivera, Garza, the first book of hers I've ever read. I finished it yesterday or a couple of days ago. And it's, you know, it's a book that pushed my, as a reader, but also as a writer, it pushed my comfort zone. Stylistically, I'm not talking about the content. It, you know, really sort of gave me lots to think about, and, you know, to reconfigure my own preconceptions and conceptions of what fiction writing is. I'm not sure I got it all, but that doesn't matter. This was, you know, terrific. So I'm going to read her other books, and yeah, so this is a sort of one writer's crush on another writer's writing. Newest favourite character. I don't really have one. I'm not that sort of bothered by sort of characters, which sounds a weird thing to say, but as a writer I'm not bothered by characters, so as a reader I'm not. But I will say one that was great fun was the journalist character in this book, Speedboat, by Renata, Adler, which I also finished recently. This is a book of almost sort of mosaic, almost newspaper clippings, articles and bulletins, but not literally from a newspaper, but actually from the character's life as a journalist in New York in the 70s, although middle-class New York, not, you know, sort of ghetto New York of burned-out houses in the Alphabet City and things like that. And it's just very funny. It's very, it's a real, because it's done as a sort of mosaic, it's a real in-depth coverage of a person's psyche without ever being psychoanalytical or reductive. It's just, this happened to me, described in detail and funny, then that happened, but it works. It's better than just a sort of prosaic as I've just presented. This is, you know, I really enjoyed this, so I guess I like the character in here. Book that made you cry. Well, I don't cry when I read. Book that made you happy. Well, the book I'm going to hold up for this is a bit sort of surprising because it doesn't really have a conventional meaning of happy. This is non-fiction, The Shapeless Unease, A Year of Not Sleeping by Samantha Harvey, who's a writer I'd read one book before and sort of met about it. But this is a beautiful piece of writing. Now, I'm not happy that she's an insomniac. I'm an insomniac. I know sort of, you know, that is far from being happy. But what I like about this is she gets quite deeply into the emotions around it, and also where it intersects with art, because I don't want to be an insomniac. I'd rather get a good night's sleep every night, and I haven't had one in about 30 years. But I also recognise its function in my psyche, that insomnia somehow facilitates my creative process. I compose stuff while I'm lying trying to get to sleep. And I think one of the reasons I think behind that is because all the business of the day that gets in the way of you sort of having that quiet space to think falls away when you sort of lie down and put your head on the pillow expecting to sleep. But that's when the writing part or the creative part of my brain goes, mister, now I've finally got your attention, let's get to work here. And there's, you know, although Harvey doesn't present that as her process, there's a lot of really, really good insight and literary insight in this book. So it made me happy because I've read quite a few books on insomnia before by writers and stuff, and they don't hit the spot. This hit the spot, absolutely. 12. Most beautiful book you've bought so far this year or received? Well, you know, I'm not that bothered by book covers. I don't have a concept of a beautiful cover, but I will say, going back to the Garza, that this picture, you know, you couldn't call it beautiful. It's rather sort of jarring because it's a piece of human skeleton. But, you know, the book is called the Iliac Crest. That is the iliac bone. And right towards the end of the book you see why the book's called that, what its significance is, and I just think I love covers that form part of the narrative itself, and too few of them do. This absolutely does. What books do you need to read by the end of the year? Okay, so there's a couple of those. The first is Lucy Ellmann's Ducks Newburyport, because I started this in December last year. I'm on page 300, so I've got 700 to go, but I would like to finish it this year. And the other, there are two Clarice Lispector books I have to... What I thought was to finish her oeuvre. This is The Chandelier. I also have her debut novel, which I can't remember what it was called. No, that's not her. They're not listed here, her books. Anyway, this and her debut, which I thought would mean I'd read all of her long fiction. I haven't read her short stories. But I noticed in Roz at Scully Dandling around the books yesterday, she mentioned that Lispector's written 9 novels. So this and the other one, if I read them, would only make 7 or 8. So I need to just go back and do my research, because I do want to be a completist about Lispector. I want to read everything that she's read. I'm totally off short stories at the moment, so that one might have to wait. But I do want to finish both of her novels, at least that I have, and sort of determine whether that makes me a completist or not. Oh yes, and of course the other things are, as I say, sort of read more German lit. So I've read 6. Lukács and I are buddy reading some Rilke poetry, which would make 7. I would like to do 12, i.e. 1 a month, or what, you know, effectively 1 a month. So that's 5 more titles. Rave by Goetz would be another one, that would make 8. I've got Thomas Bernhard's, I think, Correction, W.G. Sebald's, I've got both Austerlitz and The Rings of Saturn. I think I'll read The Rings of Saturn. I also have some Hannah Arendt, so I think that makes... that will make 11, and then I might read Brecht's The Threepenny Opera, or I've got a book of short stories. I didn't realise they were short stories when I bought them, called Satellite, I think, by what's the guy's name? I can't remember. I'll put it across in the notes. So yeah, so I do want to read more German lit. So as I say, I would have read 7 by the end of June. So that's at least another 5. Okay, and the next one is just to tag some people. So I'm going to tag Brian at Bookish to do this. Noah at Everyone Who Reads Must Converse. Roxy at Rec Me Books and Stuff. And yeah, I'm going to leave it at that for now. Okay, so until next time, thanks very much.